You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Hristodoulou.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Hristodoulou, and today we are looking at the NFC South and ranking their defenses 4 through 1, bottom to top. So we're talking the Panthers, the Buccaneers, the Saints, and the Falcons as we go through the list today. Ranking these defenses just within their division against each other. A division that I would say you have basically two halves. That's kind of how I'm looking at it at the very moment. This is one of those, could be wrong things, maybe, because I feel like the NFC South's a bit of a wonky division, but it feels like two halves, in my opinion, just kind of looking at it from a 5,000-foot view. So I invite you all to comment down below. As always, let me hear from you. Fire away. What do you agree with, disagree with, anything you may want to add along, or even just giving me your rankings 4 through 1. How would you put these 4 teams? Let me hear from you all. But we will dive in, like I said, from the bottom, working our way up to the top. And at number 4, we are looking at the Carolina Panthers, who in my eyes have quite a bit of a gap to close, as not only was this the worst team in the division last year, but quite honestly the NFL, and it wasn't very close, allowing a whopping 534 points over the entirety of the 2024 season. That put them 66 more points ahead of the team ranked second most, the Dallas Cowboys. Yes, the only team above 500 points allowed last season, and it was by a long shot. So there is quite a bit of a gap for the Carolina Panthers to make up this season. And for what it's worth, as bad as I've made this sound off the jump, I will say that I do think this defense will be better and should be fairly better going into this 2025 season. There was a clear and concerted effort to just completely revamp the defensive front, from the guys on the D-line to your edge rushers to even just some of the guys in the middle of that defense as well. A lot needed to be done with this group here, and it was nice to see that Carolina went out and not only spent the money, but also went and spent the capital on it in the draft as well to try to reshape the entirety of this defense for the most part. But you look at what they did here. We're talking 4 pretty big signings in free agency alone, bringing in a Patrick Jones II, who's coming off a career season, racking up 7 sacks in what was just a rotational role for Minnesota, a very aggressive defense, one that was really built around just allowing their guys coming off the edge to pin their ears back and let them fly and just get after the quarterback. So I'm looking forward to seeing how Patrick Jones will do in a more solidified role where he's going to see a significant increase in workload. Then you have a guy like Tershawn Wharton coming off of a career season himself in Kansas City, who honestly the only reason he's still not in Kansas City was at some point they run out of dollars to pay guys, and Tershawn Wharton, coming off a career season himself, 6.5 sacks high, 7 tackle for loss high. He was really good for the interior of that defensive line there. Another excellent pickup in my eyes. And what's nice about everyone that they've brought in is there's nobody that's really breaking the bank per se, but these are all guys coming off of really big seasons where they've earned themselves some money, and now they should look again, on paper, puts them in a better position to at least look better defensively going into this new kind of era as they work through the defense here, completely reworking this group. You also have a Bobby Brown III coming in at 6'4", 330 pounds. His stats don't really jump off the page when you read it, but this is a guy who is a literal mountain of the man who was brought in for basically one thing and one thing only, and that was to plug what was essentially a gaping canal in the run defense of Carolina last year, the Carolina Panthers run defense last year, and I don't want to make this sound like I'm just ragging on Carolina. I'm just speaking what it is. That run defense had to be one of the worst that we've seen in the NFL in quite some time in totality. So big man coming in the middle there, and I think he should be effective for them. And then a linebacker like Christian Roseboom, who I wouldn't say is the perfect addition for this defense, but a guy that's coming off, again, another career best season in tackles, maybe a little bit of a liability in coverage at times. Again, not perfect, but I do think he is an upgrade for the linebacker room there. So good money spent on a lot of guys coming off of really big seasons where hopefully they can slot into roles where they're going to see even more play time and continue to flourish in their young careers. And then you have, of course, coming out of the draft, Edge rushers, an edge rusher, Nick Scorton from Texas A&M, they went and brought in during the second round, and then Ole Miss edge rusher Princely Uman-Melayan, I believe is how that's pronounced, or Uman-Melayan. If I'm butchering it, I'm sorry. I'm not. My last name's Christodoulou, so I get it. Hard names are hard to pronounce, but 10.5 sacks for him in the 2024 season. I think that going out and getting after two guys, again, to continue to bolster that defensive front, all the right moves there, and then some for this Carolina Panthers team. And then you look going into the secondary, it's a pretty solid unit overall. I don't want to sit here and say that they're the worst or the best. They're definitely one of those, like, if all goes well, this should be at the worst, like, league average secondary. I like J.C. Horn as long as he can stay healthy. It sucks the way his career has gone, where it's like, he had his rookie season robbed from him, had a pretty solid second year, third year basically got robbed for him. Last year looked pretty good. So as long as he can stay healthy, coupled alongside of Mike Jackson, who I think has been raising some eyebrows alongside opposite field to him, should be a good tandem there at cornerback. And then bringing in a guy like Trayvon Moehrig, who is just a known thumper in the NFL and will really bring the hammer down. I do think he is a nice addition over like a departing Xavier Woods, who, he came away with 3 picks last year, but was definitely a liability in coverage at certain times. Moehrig's strong suit's not necessarily dropping back and covering himself, but maybe that's not necessarily why he needs to be there. You have a guy like Devontae Richardson, who maybe raised some eyebrows and is at least warranting a more extended look going into this second season for him. So again, this is a group that has a lot of ground to cover. Like, I cannot stress that. A lot of ground to cover. However, based off of everything that they've done to this team, it should be a better unit overall from top to bottom, front to back. I'm not sitting here. There's a reality that they close the gap and there's still maybe a bottom 10 defense in the NFL, but they're 32nd, or at least they finished last year 32nd, and so far and away 32nd that there's a lot of ground to cover. So I expect them to at least be better this year. I think their ceiling, probably something along the lines of like just being an average defense. For them to jump from where they were to being anything better than just like a league average 16th overall defense in the NFL would take a monumental turnaround that in 1 year is just a lot to ask for on the defensive side of the football. Moving into number 3, though, like I said, I look at this division and it's kind of split in like 2 halves in my eyes. You have 4 and 3, and then you have 2 and 1. And at the number 3 spot here, I opted to go with the New Orleans Saints. Now, this will be an interesting year for them as Kellen Moore takes over as the head coach. And of course, Brandon Staley is going to be the defensive coordinator of this team. Obviously, Staley, head coach of the Chargers for a few seasons, landing that job because of his work as defensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams during the 2020 season. I don't really know where I stand here because Dennis Allen always had this defense ready to go. Even during the time frame at the end of his tenure in New Orleans, the head coaching thing never really worked out for him, but the defense was still pretty good for the most part. Maybe there were some spurts where it wasn't as effective during his time as a head coach, but when he was just focusing as defensive coordinator, the defense in New Orleans was really good. Now in comes Brandon Staley. He's going to get the opportunity to basically kind of reprove himself as a defensive mastermind and show everyone the reason why he got the head coaching job that he had when he was in Los Angeles. So I'm interested in seeing how this whole thing shakes itself out, but I don't really know how it's going to go. And then the Saints are one of those teams that they've been doing the whole kick the can down the road thing for a really long time. And it feels like every single season you're just watching guys depart from this team. And you have to wonder at some point when that departing is just going to be too much for them to overcome. And I'm not saying that this is going to be the year for it, but along with some concerns I have with the way the offensive production for this team might look and just putting this defense in a bad spot, I'm a little bit worried about how things might look for New Orleans this year on the defensive side of the ball. Now, I do like that they opted to keep Chase Young around. It is an interesting move that'll be worth following as he goes through his second season with New Orleans. He only racked up 5.5 sacks last season, but the deal makes sense for both sides, and it gives him continuity to work with. And, at his best, Chase Young, I would say, is like a league average edge rusher, maybe even slightly above when he's playing at his best. So definitely, again, one of those things I'll be interested in watching there, obviously working with guys like a Cam Jordan as well. The ageless Cam Jordan, I cannot believe that he's still playing in the NFL. Considering coming out of the 2011 draft class, like that guy is escaping father time and then some. But you also go ahead and you see some changes as well. You basically flipped Will Harris and Paulson Adebo for Justin Reed and Isaac Yiadom. Now, I like the addition of Justin Reed. I should definitely say that. I feel like that is an upgrade for them. Will Harris just never felt like he really fit into the defense that they had going for them. So I do like bringing in Justin Reed. I think that's a plus. Again, another guy, victim of Kansas City, just kind of needing to pay other players that are more important to the operation over there. So not like Justin Reed was let go because he wasn't able to hang with that defense over there. It's just a matter of like they only have so many dollars to work with in Kansas City, and there's always going to be those guys that kind of find their way out. So I like the addition there. The Isaac Yiadom one is something that I'm a little bit interested about because I'm not really sure how I feel. Now, this isn't like a one-to-one you let go of Paulson Adebo to bring in Isaac Yiadom, but he is like the free agent acquisition in the corner room that you went and brought in as Adebo left. A bit of a journeyman. He's had some spots here and there where he shined. This is one of those things where it's like, if it comes down to it, do I really think he's going to be like a star for this defense? Probably not. Maybe he's just someone that hopefully you can plug in and he's like just serviceable for you at the very worst. But again, I'm just not super sure on the addition of him. Now, basically the way I look at the Saints right now, there are some question marks, like bringing in a Yiadom is definitely one of them, and how Chase Young will pan out in year number 2. But that's not to sit here and say that there aren't still good things about this unit that I like, or just guys that you can look at and go, this defense will at the very least be okay going forward. You, of course, have Tyrann Mathieu and Demario Davis, two unquestioned leaders of the unit. The ageless Demario Davis, I should add, because he continues to play at a high level despite his age. And then you have like young, up-and-coming, exciting guys, Pete Werner, Alontae Taylor, Kool-Aid McKinstry, just name a few of the guys. So this is a defense where, again, the change and regime shift is always going to be something worth keeping an eye on, and I always think it's worth at least holding some weight on that. And again, the way I've watched the New Orleans Saints just kind of slowly let guys have to go because of the way they've been kicking the can down the road with the money, I really, really want to see New Orleans like hit a hard reset, and I really thought this was going to be the offseason to do it. And now that Derek Carr has retired, maybe the opportunity next offseason can really happen where you maybe let the whole thing bottom out this season. I'm not saying they need to tank, but maybe you let it bottom out and hit the hard reset button that this team has kind of needed to hit since Drew Brees left. So I'm looking forward to seeing how things shake out for New Orleans. I just don't have super high hopes for them as it currently stands. Moving into what I would call the top half of this division here, number 2 and number 1. I think that the team I have at number 2 does maybe have a case to potentially leapfrog to be number 1, but I really like who I have at the top. So at number 2, I settled with the Atlanta Falcons. Now, I want to start off talking about the Atlanta Falcons, specifically regarding what they did this offseason and addressing the pass rush overall, specifically edge rushing. You go out, you sign Leonard Floyd, who no less than 8.5 sacks since the 2019 season, while only missing 1 game in that span. He's kind of been like a hired gun for teams every single year, or if not every other year, something along those lines. And he's just been going around, racking up sacks, creating pressure, and being good, if not great, coming off the edge for teams. Then you go into the draft, and Jalen Walker falls in your lap, and obviously you go and you draft him. You're not anticipating and getting him. And then, of course, James Pierce, the guy that this team has done a ton of work on, is still there for you, your second first-round selection. You go and you pick him up as well. That was one of the most interesting things that happened in this year's draft, in my opinion, and it's pretty interesting to say the least that the Falcons in back-to-back drafts have just kind of blown people away with some of the moves they've made in the first round. Obviously, Michael Penix being the big whoa last year, and then, of course, double-dipping edge rusher in the first round this year. The Falcons desperately needed to improve their pass rush, especially coming off of the edge. You look at the way this team was last year with only, I believe, 31 sacks altogether last season, second fewest in the NFL, only to the Patriots, who managed to fall behind them and who were above them for some time, but really bottomed out defensively towards the end of the year. You're also 25th in pressure rate, creating pressure on only basically 1 in 5 snaps. You had a 20% pressure rate. This team needed to improve that, absolutely, and I honestly respect the hell out of the effort that they made. Going and getting a Leonard Floyd and then double dipping at edge rusher, you basically have yourself now 2 opportunities at first round talents to pan out for you. Now, more than likely, only one of these guys turns into like a legit guy, long-term starter for you, and the other one doesn't pan out. That's kind of how that works out numbers-wise, per se. However, best case scenario, you have a Leonard Floyd vet, a guy that has proven production in the NFL, teaching these two young guys to potentially be your studs coming off the edges, and maybe they both pan out. That's best case scenario, and that's fantastic. You're set coming off the edge for at least the next 5 years or so until you have to work past rookie deals. So I respect the effort that they made to upgrade the room there, and I honestly kind of like it. It's aggressive. You knew what your need was, and you went after and attacked it this offseason. I can't really sit there and say that wasn't a great move. And then you couple the fact that James Pierce and Jalen Walker aren't necessarily the same exact guy by any means, two completely different sizes and two completely different play styles as well. Jalen Walker giving you someone that you can reliably have drop back into coverage as well, maybe not completely fleshed out as to what he can do there, but a guy that you can conceivably have do that, where James Pierce is more of that traditional guy. He's probably going after the quarterback more often than not. Maybe you're dropping him back to surprise an offense or surprise a quarterback on certain plays, but they have different play styles. They're not the same guy. So I really like what you're getting all together from that trio that you brought in. Then you look at, of course, the run defense last year. Overall average group, to say the least, over the course of the entirety of the year. From the edge guys that they added, on top of bringing in guys like linebacker Divine Diablo and, of course, defensive lineman Morgan Cox, that group should be better as far as trying to stop the run goes. Divine Diablo had a solid season in 2023, netting over 100 tackles. Obviously, last year, not quite as prolific. Needs to be a little bit more consistent dropping back, but I like what the additions, again, to this defense have made. Jordan Fuller for the back end of the defense. As long as he can stay healthy, he should be good as well. There's nothing that I really look at as far as this defense is concerned, and I go, there's now a gaping, glaring issue. I feel like they are solid at worst and good in some of the other areas that they needed to be in, and maybe even great when you look at your safety tandem. Again, Jordan Fuller stays healthy. I feel really good about him and Jesse Bates covering up the back end of your defense. Your secondary overall, combination of Mike Hughes, AJ Terrell, Deef Alford, you have a really solid core of guys there, so secondary feels good, and you did a lot to address some issues coming off the edge. This defense could be really good. Again, better offensive play, again, a similar thing that you're watching for the Saints, whereas I don't think it's going to go well in the Saints' favor. The Falcons, you should be getting better offensive play. That's going to put your defense in better positions as well. I like what's brewing this year, and we didn't even get into some of the other draft selections they have for this defense. This should be a good unit, and I think the big thing for them is really going to come down to the fact that you're going to have hopefully more consistent quarterback play and a more consistent offense overall. That's not putting your defense on the field more often than they should be, and that in and of itself would be a boost as well. But I really like what the Falcons did. They addressed a massive weakness and went after it, and the rest of the group of guys that they have built around that, I feel really good about. So I'm excited to see what they do here, but overall, I think they have a really strong case as the second best defense in this division here, but I did squeak out the Tampa Bay Buccaneers above them because the way I look at the Bucs right now, I kind of said this going into last year, and I said there was a lot of youth and they had a lot to prove, and there was definitely some struggles along the way. But when you look at the way this defense really figured themselves out last season, when you look past the bye week, the passing defense was definitely not perfect prior to that. They definitely tightened it up following their bye. But Tampa Bay hasn't allowed a 100-yard rushing opponent since week 9 of last year to this point. So there is a lot to like coming out of last season based off of how they improved during the second half against the pass and just how consistently good against the run they were last year as well. This defense didn't really need a ton of work. Yes, they did make some additions. You look at a Hassan Reddick, who I think should be a massive boost for you coming off the edge. When you look at where his career was prior to last season and all the drama that surrounded it, no less than 11 sacks until basically going all the way back to the 2019 season. So Hassan Reddick, as consistent as they come coming off of the edge, as long as last year wasn't some sort of career killer in any way, which I don't think it was, Hassan should be great for them coming off the edge there. And then your only other big question is kind of who plays opposite of Levante David. That's kind of the big question mark, I guess you could say, for this defense. You have your free agent pickup in Anthony Walker Jr., who I really like. You also have Servosha Dennis, who could maybe see the opportunity of what he saw last year grow even further. Maybe a Deion Jones, he's still on the defense as well. That's probably your big question mark. And then going into the secondary, I like that they went and drafted a couple of guys that are going to go ahead and bring in some talent, but also some competition to the secondary. Because you look at a guy like a Jamel Dean, who is making a pretty, not like a significant amount of money, but enough money that the conversation is, we're paying this guy at least $12 million and he can't stay healthy. You also have yourself now a second-round selection in Benjamin Moore. You also have a third-round selection in Jacob Parrish that can push after Christian Isian, who looks like he might be working the nickel spot for them, depending on how that shakes itself out. Like, there's a lot that could potentially change between now and the actual start of the season in the secondary, and a lot of it is in the defensive back room altogether between safeties and corners. But I do like that they brought in some competition from higher-up guys in the draft, second- and third-round selections there. I don't really have much beef with this defense over in Tampa Bay, and I really think that the way that they have been building this unit over the last handful of years, you look at their guys, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 guys are all people that they drafted. The other two, Hassan Reddick, and then Christian, I believe, Isian, these depth charts don't really mean anything, but he's listed as a starter on this depth chart I'm looking at here. He's obviously not a draft pick. He was an unrestricted free agent. So, like, realistically speaking, they have been building and molding this defense for quite some time now through their own draft. They know all these guys, and it's a pretty consistent unit throughout. You don't really have a lot changing on this defense going from last year into this year, and based off the improvement they made, I love consistency on a defense. I think consistency is key. It helps teams mesh. It helps them play better in the long run. This should be an improved Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense, and that's why I like them at the number 1 spot. So let me know in the comment section down below. Thoughts, opinions, agree, disagree. Let me know. Would love to hear from you all. How would you rank the units themselves, or yourselves rather? But as always, if you made it to the end, I greatly appreciate it. I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.